Welcome everybody to the seminar SIAM online seminar series. It's great that you are attending the series despite the summer. So I see a huge turnout despite, you're not, of course it's difficult to take holidays during this period, but we appreciate, of course, your participation. And today we have the pleasure of having Paolo Guasoni as the speaker for the seminar. And Paolo is, everybody knows who Paolo is. He's currently the Stokes Chair in Financial Mathematics at Dublin City University. And his interest is in mathematical finance, and he has worked on a range of problems related to market frictions, incentives, and preferences in portfolio choice and asset pricing. And his work has been well published in the major journals of the field, including journals of applied probability, mathematical finance, finance and stochastics, the SIAM Journal of Financial Mathematics, of course, and also the Journal of Financial Economics. And he has been funded by a number of agencies, both in Europe and in the US, including the National Science Foundation and European Commission. And he also serves as an associate editor for a number of premier journals of our field, including Finance and Stochastics, Mathematical Finance, and the SIAM Journal of Financial Mathematics, Applied Math Finance, and European Journal of Finance. And he also does some consulting for the US, or he has served as a consultant for the US Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Okay, Paolo, so I will leave the floor to you. And, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Agostino, and thanks for the invitation to give this virtual talk in financial mathematics to Igor, who have been, Sebastian, who are organizing this, which, you know, I respect a lot because I realize the time it takes to get these things together. But I think it's also very important that we have this event which keeps us together even when we cannot be together in person due to this virus. Anyway, so let's get started. I took the opportunity to present this work in progress, which is a somewhat unusual topic for both for me and for the financial mathematics community in general. And it's related to the topic of cryptocurrencies, and in particular Lightning Network, which is a second layer on top of Bitcoin, which I will describe in some detail. And this is a work in progress in collaboration with Guru Huberman, who is a professor of finance at Columbia Business School, and Clara Schickelman, who is a postdoc at Chaincode Labs, and she defended her PhD, I think, a year ago or something like that. And so she's really the expert on the cryptocurrencies as they unfold in real time. So we're going to start with the motivation of this topic, the limitations of Bitcoin, and the ways that they can be partially resolved by a second layer such as the Lightning Network. I will describe a model for the stationary payment flows, which is a simple way to describe what is happening in a Lightning channel. And then we will try to understand what the costs of establishing these payment channels are. And on a second step, what the implications of these cost structures are for the shape of the network itself. Okay. So this is going to be a quick overview of what I will talk about, and you are welcome to write your questions in the chat section. Agostino will put them together, and we will answer them halfway through the talk, at the end of the model section, and then at the end of the talk itself. Okay, so let's get started with Bitcoin. So this is not talk about Bitcoin itself, but I will talk strictly about the aspects that are relevant for what we're working on. So Bitcoin is essentially an anonymous payment system, which is completely decentralized. There is no trusted authority or any trusted parties. So the way it works is that there is a completely public ledger that anybody can read and investigate. And this is what it is used to essentially create a consensus of on what the transactions that are legitimate have been, and to the extent that the majority of the users in the network abide by this public ledger, and they agree to do whatever the majority says, then the network is essentially efficient in preserving the integrity of the ledger itself. So the point is that each user can help processing these payments. Okay, processing payments means that basically one adds a new block to this blockchain. Blockchain is a sequence of blocks, each of which is connected to the previous one and to the next one in a way that is essentially unique and cannot be faked. And this is achieved through some cryptographic protocols. So, but there is some important aspect in this features of Bitcoin, and that is that any new block is added about every 10 minutes, and each block cannot contain more than approximately 2,000 transactions. So there is a variant of the protocol to squeeze a bit more, but it doesn't really matter whether it's 2,000 or 3,000. The point is that there is an upper bound which is rather binding for the applications, and that is a limitation of the Bitcoin protocol. So whenever a new block is added, there is a lottery which decides which miner is the one who will add the block. So one has to work, assuming that he's going to be the lucky one, and then we'll discover only at the end whether he's the lucky one. And the winner among the miners is rewarded with Bitcoin. So that is an incentive to do this mining work. And when this incentive will disappear, then there will be other incentives such as fees for processing the transactions. Okay. So, but the main point here is that there are two limitations to this blockchain, to this Bitcoin protocol, and one is the scale. You cannot have so much more than 3 to 4 transactions per second, and this is a limit which is embedded in the protocol. So you cannot just find some simple way to get around it without violating the protocol, which defeats the purpose. And the second one is the immediacy. Okay, so it takes about 10 minutes to confirm a transaction, and if you want to be extra sure, you typically want to wait that a few more blocks are added to the blockchain to make sure that there isn't going to be a fork, which is unlikely, but you never know. So typically people say you should wait an hour to be sure. So this is of course a problem, because if you want to buy something online and it is at the delivery, for example, of a digital product, you don't want to wait an hour to get it. Okay, and whoever is going to provide the service wants to receive the payment before giving you the service. So waiting an hour is not particularly appealing as an idea. So Lightning Network is a way to essentially resolve part of these issues by keeping some of the transactions off the blockchain. Okay, so what's the main idea? So suppose you have two users, let's say Alice and Bob, that do transactions regularly. Okay, so what they can do is to use a private ledger to keep track of these. Okay, and the way that this works in the Lightning Network implementation is that each of these two parties is going to deposit some Bitcoin in an escrow account. Okay, and this escrow account can be used only for these transactions between Alice and Bob. So if they both put 3 Bitcoin, let's say, it's a lot of money, but for the sake of the example, let's keep it simple. And then Alice wants to pay Bob, it will sign some message agreeing to update the balance, And so basically now we have a new balance which either party can redeem if so decides. And if neither party redeems early, which is typically the optimal thing to do, then Alice and Bob, they can continue to transact until either of the two deposits is depleted. When that happens, then the entire balance is transferred to the owner, so the other party. And this happens on the blockchain, okay? So basically, this is a way that to keep a number of transactions off the chain, and then you go on chain only when the entire escrow account is depleted and neither party can do one more transaction without having some credit risk. Okay, so by keeping it this way, it is fully funded and there is no credit risk. Okay, so the Lightning Network is a cryptographic implementation that guarantees basically the features that I'm talking about here. Okay, so another important feature of the Lightning Network is that it allows to do links. Okay, what is a link? So suppose that you have 3 users here, Alice and Bob and Charlie. And Alice wants to pay Charlie, but Alice does not have a channel with Charlie. Alice has a channel with Bob, and Bob has a channel with Charlie. So what Alice can do is to use Bob to pay Charlie. Okay, and what happens here is that the balance is updated first in the channel between Alice and Bob, whereby Alice goes down by 1 and Bob goes up by 1. And then on the second channel, it is also updated in such a way that at the end, Charlie gets paid 1. Okay. So again, this doesn't have to be over a path of length 2, can be done on longer paths. It's done over a cryptographic protocol. And importantly, why should Bob do it? Okay, maybe Bob wants to do it because, as a favor. Maybe he doesn't want to do it as a favor. Maybe he likes to have this new balance that he ends up with by facilitating this transaction, and maybe he doesn't. In principle, he could charge a fee to facilitate this transaction. Okay, so this is one of the aspects of the Lightning Network. Okay, so we can already ask a few questions here. So, for example, which channels should be open? Okay, so suppose that you have a set of flows that people want to implement, payments towards each other, and they don't have to open a channel for each of the relationships. They can open only a few of these. Which ones should they open to keep costs under control? Second, how much should each party deposit on each channel? Okay, this is also important issue because cryptocurrency is not free. You have to pay for it. So when you lock money into a channel, that money cannot be used for other purposes. And what is the minimal cost for a channel? And what are the implications for network structure? Okay, so the general questions we can ask here are of this kind. You can ask even more questions, but we're going to start with these and see what we can say about this. Okay, so let's start talking about the model for a channel. Let's focus on a single channel, so we have only 2 users, 1 and 2. Okay, the user 1 pays 2 at some Poisson arrival times with some rate, let's say lambda 1. And the user 2 pays user 1 at some Poisson arrival times with rate lambda 2. Let's assume that 2 Poissons are independent and all the payments are of 1 unit. Okay, so you can relax this, but it keeps the tractability higher, especially for the initial questions. So user 1 is going to commit a certain amount, let's call it L1 to the channel, and user 2 will commit another L2. Okay, we have to decide what L1 and L2 are going to be. We are going to assume that this is situation that will go on forever. So when one channel is depleted, it will be replaced with another one, which is the same, okay? Completely identical. So what are the issues that we're talking about here? So whenever you deplete a channel and you have to go on chain, you have to pay a certain transaction cost, which we denote by B. Okay, B as in blockchain. This cost can either be explicit money, or it can be inconvenience in terms of waiting times, which also have a cost. But we're going to measure it in money. Okay, so B is the cost in cryptocurrency of this on-chain transaction. Second, there is also an opportunity cost, because locking up capital is costly. And so if you leave a channel funded with L1 plus L2 for small dt, this is going to cost you the interest rate multiplied by L1 plus L2. So this is what we have to balance. Now, notice also that you can do a one-directional channel if you put either of the two lambdas equal to 0, in which case only one party is paying the other, which is the typical relation you have when you establish a relationship with a merchant, and usually you pay the merchant, not the other way around, though it could be also the other way around if there are refunds, for example. Okay, so the trade-off is that if you have a higher deposit, you have lower cost from on-chain transactions, so that's the incentive to have big deposits. The counterpoint is that lower deposits imply lower opportunity costs. So what are you going to do? So first of all, this is not a trade-off that has appeared here for the first time. If you look at the literature, all the way up to Baumol, and I think there's even something older by Allais in 47, there's a literature about the demand for cash in firms. Okay, and you can see that Baumol and Tobin had a model for deterministic spending. Miller Orr also had a more sophisticated model for random balance fluctuations. And so they faced essentially the same trade-off. But there is one important difference. The important difference is that in those models, there were no alternatives. Okay. In our setting, there is the alternative, which is not to use the Lightning Network at all. You can just use all payments. You can put all payments on the blockchain, and that's an alternative. Okay. In these models on demand for cash, this is not a feature that is present. If you want to do something, comparison which is closer to what we do in mathematical finance, you can look at the literature on portfolio choice with transaction costs, which leads to a similar trade-off. Okay, not exactly the same. You have a trade-off between, leaving your portfolio away from the Merton proportion, which is in the comparison is analogous to the opportunity cost, and the cost of resetting your portfolio to where it belongs, which is the cost of transactions. Okay. Now, the difference, of course, is that in the model I'm talking about, you have a fixed cost, which is borne for each transaction, regardless of size. So this is an impulse control problem. While in these portfolio choice problems with transaction costs, you typically have proportional costs, at least lead to singular control rather than impulse control. Now, a lot of the literature on this topic of the Lightning Network is actually not in mathematics, but more in computer science, because I suppose this community is closer to development of the protocol itself. So there are a lot of papers, some of them on a similar topic as what I'm talking about here today, this Bandei, Segal, Halevi, and Doha. And many other papers are considering other aspects, such as game theoretical issues in the calculation of fees, or there is some empirical work, simulation work. I'm just putting the names here so that if you're interested, you can take a look. But I will keep the discussion more on topic here. So the first question is whether it's worth to open a channel or not. Okay. So what you can do if you don't like the Lightning Network is to settle everything on chain. So the question is, if you settle everything on chain, how much does it cost? So if you have a flow of transactions with rate lambda, what this is going to cost you is lambda b divided by r. Okay, so this is intuitive. You can think of it as the price of an annuity paying lambda b per unit of time, which is lambda b divided by r. This is not a proof, but the proof leads to the same formula. Okay. Now, what we're going to call this lambda b over r is the weight of the channel, which is also the alternative cost of the channel by not using lightning at all. Okay. So whether you should open a channel or not is a question that needs to be answered by looking at how the cost is going to be if you do use the lightning. Okay. So first result that I'm talking about is the cost of a lightning network, which is given by these formulas, which are not particularly inspiring, but they are nevertheless explicit. The part that is easy to understand here in the formula for the bidirectional channel is L1 plus L2. This is the amount of capital that you're locking up for the channel, because the model is stationary, and when a channel is extinguished, you replace it with another one. Effectively, this capital gets locked up forever, and so what you include in the cost is the entire amount of this capital. Okay. Then this other term here is proportional to the cost of the transaction. It represents the expected cost of transactions using this bandwidth for the channel. Now, the important aspect here is that you get an explicit formula once you have the amounts of the deposits, but the bad news is that you don't get an explicit formula if you want the optimal choice of L1 and L2. So this is one of the technical issues that one has to confront when dealing with this problem. And nevertheless, one can find some necessary condition to see whether it's a good idea or not to establish a lightning network. Okay? So in particular, you can say that if the flow of payments is small enough, then you shouldn't use the lightning network. Okay? So this is intuitive, but quantitatively it is not clear what this threshold should be. So this necessary condition gives you such a threshold. So for a unidirectional channel, you should have lambda which is large enough compared to R over B. Okay, so greater than R over B. Then if this is not satisfied, then you shouldn't establish a lightning network at all. For bidirectional, it's a bit trickier because you need both lambda 1 and lambda 2 to be large enough. One of them is not enough. And in particular, what you need is the geometric mean to be large enough compared to R over B. In this case, it's R over 2B rather than R over B. Now, these conditions are necessary but not sufficient. The important aspect of this theorem is that it tells you that the relevant regime for these lightning networks is when lambda, or the lambdas for bidirectional, is greater than R, significantly greater than R. Okay, so this justifies you to use asymptotics for R near 0 because R has to be small enough. Otherwise, you shouldn't use the lightning at all. Okay. So notice also that all these conditions can be written in terms of the weights themselves. So the weights are what really matters, not the lambda R or B separately. Okay. So the asymptotics at this point can be done explicitly, but only in two cases. Okay. One case is the unidirectional channel, for which you can see that the cost is of order 1/2. Okay, and the other one is the symmetric bidirectional channel, which means that the rates at which payments are flowing in one direction and in the opposite direction are exactly the same. And in this case, you have order which is not 1/2 but of 1/3, so it's a different order really. And these are even the orders that you can recognize in the older literature on cash demand for firms. 1/2 for Baumol-Tobin, and Miller-Orr, which consider the symmetric bidirectional as well, 1/3. One of the difficulty for the asymmetric bidirectional is that the order is somewhere in between, but the formulas are not particularly explicit. I have some partial results there, but the formulas are really not something that you want to look at. Okay, so with this information at hand, we can immediately answer some question about the traffic reduction. And in particular, we can see that if you know the sizes of the channel and the rates of these channels, the long-term ratio between the number of transactions you would do on chain and the number of transactions that you do with the Lightning Network is given by this explicit formula. And in particular, you can see that for a unidirectional channel, you have a linear reduction, okay, which is very intuitive, okay? If you have a channel of size 10, you will do only 1/10 of the transaction that you would do normally. Notice that here, it doesn't matter the time that elapses, because this is just the ratio between transactions you do in one case and transactions you do in the other case. And so how long each transaction takes doesn't really matter. In other words, what matters is just the ratio between the two lambdas, not the lambdas themselves. And in the other case, if you have a symmetric bidirectional channel, you have a bilinear ratio, which means that for symmetric bidirectional channel in a optimal with optimal sizes, this is quadratic. Okay, so quadratic reflects the effect of netting, the fact that you have essentially a random walk rather than steady drift in one direction. This allows you to do many fewer transactions that you would do on chain otherwise. Okay, so this is quite natural. So at this point, maybe we can do small break for questions if there are any.
So thanks, Paolo. I think there is a question by Sergei Tikhomirov, and Sergei, I think you should be able to ask the question. You are a panelist. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for your talk. Just a couple of slides before, when you introduced the model, there was this notion that the higher is the deposit, the lower are the on-chain fees, and I'm not sure that I fully grasped it, because it's kind of the first point on this, the trade-off. Higher deposit implies lower costs from on-chain transactions. So could you elaborate on this point?
Yes. So suppose that we have a one-directional channel between you and me. I pay you, and you never pay me. Okay. So if I post 10 bitcoins, and at each time I pay you 1 bitcoin, then we will have to do one on-chain transaction, only 1 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, I see. So if we deposit, the more coins we deposit into a channel, the more kind of freedom we have to exchange many off-chain transactions before we run out of funds in the channel.
Precisely. There's not more than this. It's just the fact that if you withdraw more money from the bank when you go to the ATM machine, then you will have to do fewer trips. And that was the setting that people had in mind in the 50s when they were writing these demand for cash.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. So we have another question from Maxime Bikuch. And Maxime, you should be able to ask the question. Go ahead.
Hi, Paolo. I was wondering, what is the real magnitude of R? Is it actually strictly greater than 0?
Okay. Yes, this is a good question, especially nowadays. Now, this is an important aspect, because notice that you can hold Bitcoin without having any penalty, okay? So if we neglect the risk that you are going to be robbed of your Bitcoin wallet, okay, which I think if you are careful enough, probably it can be done. You can hold your Bitcoin in your hard drive, and they will stay there forever. Nobody can charge you interest for holding the Bitcoin. So in other words, the interest rate for the cryptocurrency itself is intrinsically greater or equal than 0. It behaves like cash. If you take cash and you store it, somewhere safe, nobody can take away it from you. Okay, so they are not like bank deposits, which can be charged a negative rate if you want to keep them in the bank. But in general, this is opportunity cost, right? So it is positive by construction.
Okay. And I have a question, Paul, more about the function of the Lightning channel. So you mentioned at the very beginning that basically one of the main advantages with respect to using directly Bitcoin is that there is a speed component that you gain when you use the Lightning network, right?
Yes.
It's faster. And this, I think, is because, as you mentioned, there is no authentication on the transactions.
Well,
there is not distributed the consensus that has to be achieved.
Exactly, yes. There is no distributed consensus.
But does it mean that the transactions somehow are less secure than if you use Bitcoin? So there must be some disadvantage relative to Bitcoin.
Well, okay. So first of all, it is not in competition with Bitcoin because this is still a second layer on top of Bitcoin. It is not an alternative.
Yeah.
But the disadvantage is that if, let's say, I pay you 1 Bitcoin and it stays inside the channel between you and me, you are safe that this Bitcoin now belongs to you because I have signed a message which agrees to the updated balance. So if I start cheating, you can just go to the blockchain, you can close the channel early, and you will get the Bitcoin that you deserve. So from a security viewpoint, I think it's okay. The part that is less attractive is that you cannot spend that Bitcoin until the channel is closed.
I see.
Okay, so that Bitcoin, so long as it stays inside the channel, can only be used for payments between you and me. Yeah.
So that's basically the opportunity.
That's the limitation of this second layer of private ledgers.
Okay, thanks. There are a couple of other questions. One is from Sebastian Jaimungel. Sebastian, please go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. We could take it at the end if it's running too late, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, you can go ahead. I think we have.
Okay, I was just wondering, you had this assumption that when the channel's depleted, then it reinstantiates at the same initial deposit as the start, correct? And that was this sort of stationarity assumption? Yes. Is it possible to relax that? Because it's not clear to me how reasonable that is, but so maybe that's two questions in one.
So if you want to relax that,
how reasonable is
relax the assumption that the payments are flowing at a constant Poisson, because so long as the rates remain the same, there is no point in setting up different balances.
Okay. Okay.
If you assume that the Poissons can change their rates, when the rates change, then the optimal balances will also change. But if the rates are the same, there is no point in setting up different deposits.
Okay,
at least within the setting of cost minimization that we are considering here. Okay.
I see. Okay. Right. So it's really about the stationarity of the Poisson process. The fact that it's a constant rate that seems to imply that you should always restart with the same balance. Okay. Exactly. All right. Great. Thanks.
Perfect. So there is another question by Arby, but let's continue. And Arby, you can ask the question at the end. I hope you will not be offended by that. So please, Paolo, go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
We finish on time.
So at this point, we want to do something different. Okay. So what I did before was essentially a control problem. What we want to do is to see what are the implications of these cost structures for the shape or the topology or structure of the graphs, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So here we have to consider a lot of users, not just two. And we're going to call them vertices if you want, in terms of graph theory. And then we're going to consider a set of flows. Okay, a set of flows means what people want to do. Okay, so VI, VJ, lambda ij means that Mr. I wants to pay Miss J at the rate of typically lambda ij. And it may well be that Miss J wants to pay Mr. I at some other rate, and that will be lambda ji. Okay, so these flows are what needs to be done. Okay, how can we do it? Well, a trivial way to do it is that we set up a lightning channel for each of these payment relationships, VI, VJ, lambda ij. But we don't have to do all this because of the link property of the Lightning Network. So what we're going to say is that a valid Lightning Network with respect to a set of payments F is a set of payments for which there's always a path for each of the payment relationships. Okay? And we are going to put the weights on each edge of the graph so that they reflect all the flows that are channeled to that particular edge to satisfy all the payments that are coming through. Okay, so I'm not writing it explicitly in mathematical terms because this would become notationally heavy, but intuitively this is quite natural. Okay, so you want to establish only a subset of the links that are necessary, and then you want to route all the payments that need to be done through paths of possibly longer length than one. Okay, so we're going to denote the cost associated to a particular graph with some f of g. Okay, so that's the total cost. And then we're going to say the following. Let's suppose that there are a small group of users that can change the network to reduce the cost. Okay, so let's say that you have 3 or 4 people who decide, well, we can actually reduce our cost by just changing the links among ourselves, and everybody's better off. So it is going to be Pareto optimal in a certain sense, and we are going to do it. Nobody stops these people from doing it because these lightning channels are bilateral. So as long as 2 people agree, the channel can be established or removed. So if we let people act according to these rules, even though I incorrectly said before Pareto optimal, this is not correct. So I will correct myself shortly afterwards. What is the implication for the structure of the graph? Okay, so the first type of change that we allow the users to do is a mutation. Okay, and we call a graph immutable of order k, so k immutable, if basically k users cannot improve the graph by changing the links only amongst themselves. Okay, so 3 immutable means that 3 people cannot get together, change the links amongst the 3 of them, and get a lower cost for the 3 of them, adding up the total costs. So this is not in a Pareto optimal sense. This is in a, let's say, small community welfare cannot be reduced. Okay, so we have 3 people, let's say, that they agree that their common goal should be to reduce the total cost of the channels amongst the 3 of them, and so long as they agree to act together upon based on this criterion, then they can decide to reshape locally the network. Okay, so this is a simple example. You start off with this scheme, and if these people agree, they can decide to replace it with a cycle of length 5, for example. And in this case, depending on the weights of these channels, they may be better off with the resulting setting. Okay, if that were the case, the graph would not be k-mutable. If it is k-mutable, it means that you cannot do any local change to make it better. The other improvement we consider is the hermetization. Okay, so what is the hermetization? It means that maybe we could call it differently. We'll see whether we change our mind, but we call a graph hermetic if you cannot insert a new user to act as an intermediary and improve the cost of the channels, okay? So suppose that you have these 4 guys that have established these, 1, 2, 3, 4 channels amongst themselves. Suppose that V5 comes in and says, look guys, stop trading among yourself, just establish a channel with me and I will route all the transactions, and perhaps you save so much money that I can charge you a small fee for the favor. Even better, maybe one of these guys could decide to do that, right? So if this process cannot improve, then we call that the graph is hermetic, okay? It means that you cannot add one extra user and then get lower global cost from the new arrangement. Okay, so the first result that you get out of these 2 potential changes that we're considering is that if you have a 3 immutable graph, so if you let communities of 3 to improve the graph, so if you let 3 people at a time to cooperate to reduce the cost, then the result is that you will never see something like this, okay? You will never see that somebody is paying somebody else who is also only paying, okay? So how do you do this? Well, you show that you can do better. The way that you do better is that V1 here should not be paying V2, who in turn pays V3, should just pay V3, and V2 should just exchange payments with V3 so that they can benefit from the netting that can be between the 2 of them. So why? So is this a curiosity or is it more than that? It is a bit more than that, because it implies that essentially if you remove all the bidirectional graphs, what you get is a family of stars, okay? So in other words, you have a hub and spoke structure arising from this simple observation that you cannot have a path, the active path of length 2, okay? So this already tells you something about what can minimize the cost and what cannot minimize the cost. So I'm conscious of the time, so I might not go through the whole thing, or do you give me another 10?
Let's say around 5 minutes at most.
5 minutes, okay, so I will do it quickly. So you can do a bit more than this. You can also show that in any 3 immutable graph, you cannot have any 3 cycles, okay? What does this mean? It means that in terms of network theory, the bidirectional clustering is exactly 0. Okay, there cannot be any clustering. So this means that this structure is incompatible with a lot of random graphs models, like Erdős-Rényi, small world, and others. All these models exhibit a significant amount of clustering. Here, the clustering should be 0 for anything that is remotely optimal. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind if one wants to simulate these Lightning networks, because there shouldn't be much clustering around. Notice that this is not true if you try to do it with 5, but there's a counterexample there. Now, intermediation. For intermediation, we have another result which establishes, let's do it quickly, a criterion under which you can improve by adding an intermediary, okay? So the criterion says that if you have an average degree greater than the square root of the discrepancy times a constant, then you can just star these little communities and improve them. So what is the discrepancy? The discrepancy is the maximum ratio between the largest payment that you make and the smallest payment that you make. So you will pay somebody, let's say, $10 a month, and that's the lowest payment. You will pay somebody else, I don't know, 5,000 a month, and then your ratio in this case would be 500. Okay, so if you have this ratio between this relationship between the average degree of the graph and the maximum discrepancy, then you can just take away all the links, replace them with connection to the star. Now, when can you start the entire graph? Well, this is not obvious, okay, but one can say something about this. One can say, in particular, that if you assume that the distribution of the rates for each node follow a power law, which is acknowledged as relevant for these kind of problems, then you can find a lower bound for the probability that the entire graph can be starred completely with a single intermediary. And that says basically that if you have thinner tails for the distribution of payment rates, and if you have more neighbors, then it is more likely that you can improve by starring the entire network. Okay. So the bad news is that if the optimal shape is a star, that means that the network is very fragile from a security viewpoint. Okay, so this is one of the issues. So a couple of words on open questions. Tractability of the asymmetric bidirectional channel is a problem. Perhaps it can be improved, what we have done, and having more tractability there helps, sharpen the results for the network structure. Alternative cost objectives, one could assume that more people are cooperating or that people are not cooperating at all. I'm not sure that entire lack of cooperation is a good benchmark here. How to set the fees in equilibrium. This is another issue that we have not touched. If you facilitate payments, you may want to get paid for that. The question is how much you should charge and whether people should pay for that and what will happen in equilibrium. The effect of such fees on network structure is also a related issue, which means, everybody's acting optimally, what is the structure and what are the fees. We are not doing it here. Here we're assuming that facilitation is essentially free. So in conclusion, I've talked about the Lightning Network, which is a second layer on top of Bitcoin. There are channels between two nodes at a time and links, which are, longer paths. The channels should be used only when payments are frequent enough. Channel costs are of different order for unidirectional and bidirectional. This is as in the cash demand literature. There are structural implications from these channel costs, and this is, an area that is completely separate from what people have done in demand cash demand literature. There should be no clustering in any of these potentially optimal models. Typical shape is something like hub and spokes. There is a potential for intermediaries to charge small fees in well-connected communities with kind of homogeneous distribution of the links. And also there is a trade-off clearly between the security and efficiency, because efficiency tends you to reduce the number of links, but this creates security issues that we are not considering in this work, because once you have very few links, if one link is broken, then you may not be able to pay a lot of people or to get paid from a lot of people. And that ends my discussion. Thanks for bearing with me for a few more minutes, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you, Paolo, for a very interesting talk. I would like to let Harvey Stein to ask his question. Harvey, you should be able to go.
Hi, very nice talk. I had a question about how this Lightning chain transactions work. How do you guarantee when you want to give $1, when A wants to give $1 to C and they do it via B, that B actually does the transaction to C?
Well, essentially, so to be completely honest, I do not know the cryptographic details, okay? But this is enforced in a cryptographic protocol whereby I am sending you a message, and this message contains my signature, but it can be unlocked only by the final target. Okay, so it must be, here I am imagining more than confirming. Probably I'm going to use the public key of the target to use some some signature. I use my signature, I use the public key of the target, and the target is the only one who can unlock the Bitcoin which is sent through you. You can pass it along, or you can decide not to pass it along, but if you do not pass it along, you cannot spend it, and you cannot even and I will not be even charged for it. So until the message is cryptographically hopping all the steps it has to do, then it will not, then the transaction will not take place effectively.
Okay,
But
so it's more like an intent transaction that's initiated through a sequence of underlying steps.
Yes. But my co-author, Clara, should be among the attendees, and she might be able to give you more details than I did, which is not very much.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. I think Clara should be now promoted to panelist. Clara, do you want to elaborate more on what Paolo said? Yeah, I think, let's see, she's an import. Okay, maybe while we wait for Clara, hopefully she will be able to jump in. I would like...
Okay. Hi, so I just wanted to say that Paolo's description is not too far from the truth. So I think for the sake of time, I will not elaborate too much into that, but it does have to do with the transaction hopping and then hopping back. So you send a message and then you send it back down, and then things unlock, and it is everything or nothing. And there are time locks. So if the end user, for example, disappears, you can take your money back. And yeah, it's a pretty sharp protocol, and I encourage all of you to read some more about this.
Good. So let's go to the next question from Luis Bertucci. Luis, please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Paolo, for this very interesting talk. I had a question about the model regarding the network. If I understood correctly, you assume that all the payment flows, the sets of Fs, it's like common knowledge about among all the nodes. So, I mean, is this correct? And if it is, did you think about other assumptions regarding the information structure, in particular how nodes that are not necessarily end users might want to jump in the network and have no particular information about the real demand, but still want to become an intermediary in this network and charge routing fees?
Okay. So here, so there are two issues. So one issue is that if you and I want to establish a channel, it is natural to assume that you know the rate at which you pay me, and you also know the rate at which I pay you, right? So otherwise, we're not getting paid. So this is all we need to know to decide how much we want to establish as deposit for you and me. Okay, so at the bilateral level, I think this is the minimal assumption that one can make. Now, if we think about the network structure, this is more complicated. because in principle, if I have more information about the rates at which other people are paying each other, then I can use that to create a business and try to propose myself as a potential intermediary. But the extent to which this information is private is also a matter of debate, I think, because at the end of the day, any channel that is active enough will generate transactions on the blockchain. These transactions on the blockchains are, by definition, public. So if one is willing to, try to, let's say, reverse engineering enough the blockchain, one should be able to see that there is a pattern there and there are people who are regularly paying each other. And then, in principle, one could try to contact these people, of course, assuming that one can know the identity of the people involved, which is, of course, not part of the public information on the blockchain. So I think that for the network part, there might be scope for different assumptions regarding the information structure. We are not there yet. What we did is to assume that every set of 3 people will consider to make improvement. Okay. This may be too much if you assume that not all sets of 3 people know each other or are willing to talk to each other. Or it may be too little in the sense that if you want to assume that there can be grand coalitions to be formed, we did not consider the implications of that.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so there are a couple of other questions, but I would like to postpone them to the informal Q&A that we will have later, because we are almost on the hour. I would like to close the session by, first of all, thanking Paolo for giving a very interesting talk. Also reminding you that we will see each other again virtually in 2 weeks. There will be a new seminar like 2 weeks from now on Thursday by Sergei Nadoshi. And also, I want to remind you that we have, despite the uncertainty, we are still going ahead with the organization of the conference with Igor Chalenko here, and as you may have noticed, or you might have received an email if you are a member of SIAM, and the call for participation has been issued, and the deadline for submitting mini symposium proposal is December 3. So please start thinking about mini symposium proposals, contacting potential speakers and so on. We are all looking forward to receiving a lot of submissions and of course to seeing you in person at the meeting, like if everything goes as planned. I mean, hopefully, if everything goes in the best possible way. And also there are other deadlines. There is like the deadline of January 7, 2021 for contributed lecture, and also the travel fund application deadline is on December 17 this year. And the conference is from June 1 to June 4 on 2021 in Philadelphia. So please, if you have not received the call, let either me or Igor know, and we will be happy to keep you posted and send the relevant information. And with this, I would like to close this session. And again, thanks Paolo for agreeing to give a talk and for delivering a talk on a very timely topic. And please don't leave, because we will have an informal Q&A where people that want to ask questions will be free to ask. And we will have also an informal discussion with Paolo on maybe follow up of his research and so on. So thank you again for coming. Yeah, and we can